Hi to all of our students. We're going to be going into the human circulatory system in this first video on the human circulatory system. We're first going to introduce the idea of a closed system of arteries, veins, and capillaries. All right, this is called a closed circulatory system. All mammals have a blood supply that is contained within arteries, veins, and capillaries. So the blood cells are found there. There are organisms that have an open circulatory system. I do have an example here that I can share with you really briefly. This is a grasshopper picture, and a grasshopper has a series of little hearts that pick up blood from what would be equivalent to like an oil pan down at the lower part of their body. Blood collects, and the hearts will siphon up blood and pump it up and over the brain, and it will trickle back down during the activity of the insect. So this is an open system where blood is in the blood vessels some of the time, and it's not in the vessels at other times. With humans and other mammals, many other organisms for that matter, a closed system means all the blood stays in those vessels. Blood's job primarily is to deliver nutrients and oxygen to all the cells of the body. Those two items, very important to know. They also, however, uh, will be carrying CO2 and metabolic waste. So all the waste that your body generates has to be eliminated using the blood supply as well. Here are the names of the vessels. The arteries and the smaller arterioles are vessels that carry blood away from the heart. So there's the A, away, mnemonic. That should help you remember the direction of blood flow. These are going away from the heart. Arteries have thick muscular walls and no valves because they're under such high pressure. There are two main blood vessels that leave the heart. There's the pulmonary artery and the aorta. These two right here. The pulmonary artery always goes to the lungs. So it is going to the lungs to pick up oxygen and deliver or eliminate the carbon dioxide. The aorta is carrying blood to the body. We call this systemic flow. So there's pulmonary and there's systemic blood flow. The veins, on the other hand, are bringing blood back towards the heart. They tend to be low pressure, right? So they are a thinner wall, and we'll discuss the structure of them in just a moment, but they carry blood back from the lungs and back from the body. They have thin walls and they have valves. Because they're under low pressure, there's a risk of blood flowing backwards. They have valves to prevent that. There are two main types of veins that lead into the heart. There's the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary vein leads back from the lungs, and then there is the vena cava. Now there's two of these. There's the superior and the inferior. Superior drains the upper half of the body, and the inferior vena cava drains all the blood from the organs in the lower half of the body. And smack dab in the middle, in all of the organs of your body, are the capillaries. These are the smallest blood vessels, and they transport blood cells, nutrients, oxygen, salts, sugars, everything you need. It gets delivered to the cells via the capillaries. Here's the difference in the structure. So arteries have this thick muscular wall, and then veins have a thin, flimsy, kind of very, very flexible wall. And there can be valves located in here to keep blood moving in the right direction. The smallest vessels are the capillaries. They have a single cell layer that surrounds them, allowing for diffusion to move materials from inside the blood to the cells that surround them. The main organ of the circulatory system is the heart. It is a muscle, and that muscle is known as the myocardium. Now, myocardium is a name that is derived from the protein that makes them up. I'm having a hard time clicking here. It's really making my day great. So the myocardium, there we go, is the muscle. It's named for the protein myosin. Myosin is a protein that is able to contract. So let's talk about that heart structure and function. There's an external and internal set of structures that you need to be familiar with. Externally, the heart is surrounded by a pericardium. This is a root peri. That prefix peri means around. And I'm going to actually pause for a moment and bring this up because this model of the heart, it gives me an opportunity to say that pericardium is two layers. So there's a layer that is attached directly to the outside of the heart, but there's a second layer around that. And in between, in a very thin film, is a lubricating layer. It's a moist layer in between. So as the heart beats and moves, there's less friction. All right. And that is the purpose of the pericardium. It's to provide a little bit of protection from friction for the heart. Internally, the heart muscle is a little more noticeable in this picture. All right. All this thick red wall is all myocardium. You'll see these strands of tendinous or sinewy material. This holds and supports the valves within the heart. All right. So there are four chambers. And we always refer to images of the body in anatomical position. So this picture that I'm pulling over right here shows the idea of anatomical position. Every image, unless otherwise stated, will be in anatomical position, meaning facing you, palms forward. So this is that individual's right hand shoulder. This is their left shoulder. And that means that person's heart is shown here. This would be the right side of the heart, and this is the left side of the heart. All images will be shown in anatomical position. So there are four chambers. The top two chambers are the atria. Now, the easiest way to identify the atria is if I draw it with a little mnemonic here. If I make this A at the top of a heart, this top portion is the atrium. Plural is atria. So this is the right atrium, and there would be a left atrium over here. Ventricles are the lower chambers, and they tend to be pointed or V-shaped. And these do the majority of the pumping. These have to be very muscular, strong enough to push blood through all the vessels and through the organs of your body. There's a left side and a right side as indicated here, and that is divided by the septum. The septum is that division. It's a tough, muscular, and excuse me, it's a tough muscular structure that just divides the left and right side. The atrium and the ventricle are divided by valves, and those two valves are known as the atrioventricular valves. There's a left atrioventricular valve and a right atrioventricular valve. These formerly have been known as the mitral valve and tricuspid valve, and so you may see that from time to time in any reading that you do. But these are the only gates between the atrium and the ventricles. I'm going to bring my picture back over here again because if I open this heart up, we can actually see those valves in the heart. So this is the right atrioventricular valve, and up here would be the right atrium. And these blue vessels going in would be the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. They lead into the right atrium. The right atrium contracts and pushes blood through the atrioventricular valve into the right ventricle. When that contracts, this valve slams shut, preventing blood from going back into the atrium. It's going to force them through this valve. This valve is going to take it into the pulmonary artery. Right? Arteries always flow away from the heart. So since it's leaving the heart, this is an artery, and this would be uh, the semilunar valve. All right, so here we go again. From the opposite side, those is the left side of the heart. You got the left atrium, and then you have an atrioventricular valve, and you can even see they've included these sinewy type connections that support the valve. All right, that keeps the valve from flipping backwards under the intense pressure of the ventricle. When this ventricle contracts, it pushes all the blood through another semilunar valve, and this goes into the aorta, this red vessel right here. The aorta is going to go to the entire body. All right, so let's talk about how that is organized. I just went through that, so if you want to rewind and walk through it again, the superior and inferior vena cava both feed into the right atrium, and when the atrium contracts, it pushes blood down into the right ventricle. That is going to push out into the pulmonary arteries going to the lung. Anytime you see the word pulmonary, it means lungs. As blood returns from the heart, or excuse me, from the lungs to the heart, it's going to go into the opposite side of the heart. This is the left atrium. It'll go through the bicuspid valve and into the left ventricle. Now remember, bicuspid valve is now typically referred to as just an atrioventricular valve. That gets pushed out through the left ventricle through a semilunar valve into the aorta. Now you'll notice that in both cases, the ventricles push blood up and out. The vessels that leave the heart are going to come out the top of the heart. And you can follow these arrows to see the flow of blood. Blue stays with blue, red stays with red. And if you enlarge this, you'll see that those labels are pretty clear. You should make sure that you know the chambers of the heart as well as the valves and vessels that they also have contained in it. The heartbeat cycle is divided into two parts, systole and diastole. The systole, or I don't think I've ever heard anyone call it diastole, but it's systole and diastole. The higher number is the high pressure contraction phase, and then the lower number, the smaller number, is the relaxation phase. It's low pressure. So when you have that blood pressure cuff put on your arm at the doctor's office, they pump it up and they block blood flow. They can feel the difference and measure the difference in pressure from when the heart beats and pushes blood past, and then when it's relaxed and blood passes. There is a nerve connection that controls the heart, and there are actually two important nodes here, the SA node and the AV node. This stands for sinoatrial node and atrioventricular node. These two nodes tell the heart to beat in a rhythmic pattern from top to bottom so that it pushes blood out. These act as the pacemaker of the heart. Your brain has only a minor amount of control over this particular node, and it operates very independently, regulating your blood pressure, or excuse me, your heart rate as you go through your daily activities. A couple of disorders that you should be aware of. Hypertension is high blood pressure. It can be caused by diet, like diet that's high in fats or high in salt can lead to high blood pressure. And then there's arteriosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries. This is where your body will deposit plaque, which is like a cholesterol material on the inside of an artery, causing the diameter of the vessel to shrink. And it is the equivalent of putting your thumb over a garden hose to get it to spray farther. It increases the pressure on the blood, and in doing so, it increases your risk of a blood vessel failing and having a heart attack or a stroke. The difference between heart attack and stroke is kind of important. Heart attacks occur in the heart. It's a blood vessel that is blocked or broken in the heart. And then a stroke is a blocked or damaged blood vessel in the brain. There is also a difference in brain bleeds. If a vessel breaks completely, then we would be talking about something like an aneurysm. Um, Pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. I alluded to these earlier. Pulmonary circulation only goes between the heart and lungs. Systemic goes to the entire body. The aorta delivers all of the systemic circulation. There are a few important branches off of the aorta that you should be aware of. The coronary circulation is the first branch that happens off of the heart. So if this is your heart, these blood vessels are all part of the coronary circulation. There's an artery that goes in and a vein that pulls blood out. Right? That's the first branch off of the aorta because the heart is the main organ that needs to be delivered the oxygen and nutrients it needs to continue to function. Without that, you're dead as a doornail. Okay, so coronary circulation is to the heart. Hepatic circulation or hepatic portal is the set of vessels that goes directly to the liver. So you need to recognize that anything that has the word hepatic, like hepatitis, you've probably heard of hepatitis. So hepatic portal circulation always is referring to the liver. Renal circulation, anything that has to do with renal, is the kidneys. So if you hear renal failure, it just means kidney failure. Now there's a whole separate set of vessels called the lymphatic vessels or lymphatic system that collects the leaky fluid from the capillaries that are allowing the plasma to leak out of the vessels for all the cells to use. The fluid is called lymph. It fills the spaces in between cells. We call that intercellular fluid. There are a series of ducts or tubes that lymph collects in, and periodically in different regions of the body, there are lymph nodes. Your doctor feels these in your neck to see if you potentially have an infection, because the lymph nodes are where white blood cells tend to collect. White blood cells fight infection, and they get swollen if there's an accumulation of white blood cells that are there. You have a lot of these in your armpits. You have them in your neck, all along your torso, in your groin. You have a few important lymph nodes behind your knees as well. So the lymph nodes are where white blood cells congregate. Your spleen is a filter for this foreign matter, and there are 3 really valuable videos here about interstitial fluid and lymph, about the circulatory and respiratory system as a whole, and then also a medical procedure called a carotid endarterectomy. So here is a slide that summarizes all of the activities of the blood. These are all the important functions that the blood does for your body. It carries oxygen and carbon dioxide. So oxygen's going to the cells, carbon dioxide has to be removed. It carries nutrients and wastes, nutrients going towards, waste coming away. But we're going to talk about these other ones in a little more detail in just a moment. It has the ability to heal injury or wounds. Platelets are going to have an important role here. Your blood distributes heat for your body. So the heart Pumping blood to your fingertips and your toes keeps them warmer. It also is the reason why you can lose so much heat from your hands and your feet because blood is constantly going there. It fights infection with the roles of the white blood cells, and it also carries all your hormones and chemical messages for body function. All right, so here let's break down the different parts of the blood and tell what they do. First off, there's a diagram here that shows the four main parts of the blood. You've got this yellowy straw colored plasma, which is 55% of your water of your blood. Then you've got a very small percentage that are white blood cells and platelets. That's less than 1% of your blood volume is white blood cells and platelets. And then red blood cells make up about 45% of your blood volume. This is a test tube that has had a blood sample put into it, and it was spun in a centrifuge, which separates things by density. So that plasma, which is the straw colored fluid that if you've ever had a rug burn or turf burn, you've seen the liquid, that clear fluid that will kind of make that injury wet. That's plasma. Right? That plasma is the leaky fluid that's coming out of your capillaries and filling the interstitial spaces. It's mostly water, but it does contain dissolved nutrients like proteins, sugars, and salts. It also will have hormones in it. It'll also carry some carbon dioxide and oxygen that dissolve in it. But it has a very important role. Red blood cells, the second type and the second largest component, are the thin red disc-shaped cells within the blood. They're known as erythrocytes. They are concave or disc-shaped because the nucleus has been removed. These are made in the bone marrow, just like most of the white blood cells, which you see as this white blob here. They're made in the bone marrow. You make about you replace these every 3 months. Right, the lifespan of this is only about 3 months, and you make a protein called hemoglobin that carries the oxygen and carbon dioxide that gives it this red color that blood has. You have about 30 trillion red blood cells in your body. Now, obviously, that's an estimation because larger people are going to have more red blood cells. There are also different conditions that can influence that. White blood cells, which I pointed out in this picture up here, are called leukocytes. There are several different varieties of white blood cells. They are all responsible for defending the body from infection. They do have a nucleus and they tend to be larger than red blood cells. When you look at a blood slide in our lab, you'll see that they've all been stained though. They tend to have a very bright purpley color. There are about 60 billion in the body, and they are made in the bone marrow and lymphatic tissue, and they're responsible for making antibodies and controlling your immune response, which we talked about earlier in the previous units. Platelets are the cells that are involved in blood clotting. So when you do break a blood vessel, these tiny little protein particles called platelets are actually going to get stuck to a different protein called fibrin. And in connecting with them, when fibrin comes in contact with the air, it starts to congeal and form this net that's known as fibrinogen. Platelets stick to this, and the red blood cells start to get jammed up, and they dry out and form a scab. So the combination of activity between the platelets, the fibrin protein, and those drying out will clot a broken vessel and prevent you from bleeding to death. There are people who have a bleeding condition known as hemophilia, where they don't produce clotting factors that will help to turn that fibrin into fibrinogen and make it sticky so that they stop bleeding. the clotting process starts with that rupture of a blood vessel, and there's a series of enzyme controlled reactions that involve fibrin and the clotting factors that trap the blood cells and form that clot. Okay, so I'm going to stop now. If you have any questions, please see your teacher, ask questions, be curious. But if you do have any questions, by all means, come and see us. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.